tell me about your pastoral journey. The Church Without Walls is the third church
Yes,
you have
really,
pastored.
third church.
Tell us about your pastoral experiences in first two churches, and maybe put them in context of how they laid alongside of your education process.
Well, when I was a sociology student at Bishop, Joe Howard, he was a Baylor graduate PhD sociologist, and he taught sociology at the school. It was one of the classes I really excelled well in. I like studying and understanding culture. I really wish that I would have pursued something in addition to theological education along with, sociology. He pastored a transitioning church named Fruitdale. It was Southern Baptist Church. And he asked me would I come over and preach for him, and I did. And then he sat down and asked if I would come over and help him transition that church, and I told him I'll pray about it. My pastor in Dallas said I thought it was a good idea. My pastor at home said, why don't you just want you to help transition it. He was retiring in a couple of years, so the first year I just in and out, but that last year, my senior year, I really came over to help support him transition the church to his retirement. He recommended that, Ralph has helped transition us, just put him in as the pastor. They said amen to that while he was there. But on the other hand, it's not their fault. I mean, man, I knew absolutely nothing about pastoring the church or anything like that. I saw observations, but I had not been involved. Pastoring to me was you the pastor, you do your thing, because nobody protested. Any of my pastors, my pastor at home, my pastor there, they just kind of larger than life. It's funny. Now, I'm going to tell you what's strange. I never associated this until while we're talking about it now. My pastor at home, though he was not the founding pastor, he was the first pastor of our home church, because our church, great history behind that. Old Pleasant Grove, they would call it. Omerly Holiday pastored there. Church burned down, they reorganized, people went different ways. They called O.C. was the first pastor. Mount Tabor, where I was, pastor was the founding pastor. It didn't hit me until we're talking now. So it may explain why they were just able to say, turn left, right, go forward, backwards, which may not be the greatest tool of learning how to pastor in a church where the pastor is larger than life, So anyway, they agreed to it, and then after he left, man, it was like, we don't need Ralph here, And so I wish they would have told me other than on the day that they were going to do my installation. So I was actually asked to lead the church on my installation day.
Wow.
I never would talk about it. One of my dear friends said, you should talk about that for your own healing, but also for your help to help other people. So, people have they don't care about what day it is that they actually leave. And then this is when I'm in seminary and things like this. Rhea and I get married, and I was at my home church, and Brother Whitaker, he was the grand poobah. Now, those of you who are Masons don't get offended by this because I just teased him that way. L.H. Bosdick was the grand poobah, and the assistant to him was a guy named Brother Whitaker in our home church. Brother Whitaker comes to me one Sunday morning. He says, Ralph, there's a church that's vacant, just outside of Houston, Brookshire, Texas. They need a pastor. I said, okay, I'll go down there and preach and everything. So I went down and preached. When I drove up, L.H. Bosdick met me there, and that day he said, before I even preached, he said, our pastor's here. So they called me to that little church, and it's one of my fond memories. I really enjoyed it. Now, interestingly, Brookshire, Texas was like driving forever, right? Brookshire, Texas is 6 miles from where my present church is right now. My life keep going back,
Yes, sir.
I mean, and so, and I had a great time there. L.H. Bosdick, I wrote a chapter for a book about him. He was my chairman of deacons. Man, I tell you, he was a chairman of deacons. He really was. He could have given me the blues if he wanted to, but he was so much a man that he did not mind being submissive to a young man.
Wow.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, man, he was the man, too. But anyway, he knew I wouldn't stay that long, and I got called to Greater Mount Zion in Houston. And this church, it was a good church at one time, and it's still good. It was just a church that, couldn't move from its past. And in love with its past, and like churches like that, they get these families that become inbred and intermarried, and everybody's related to everybody, and you never get nothing, this, and I really mean this lovingly, this deacon was married to her, and now they divorced, and now she married to the new deacon, and he married to the new usher, but they done divorced now. So you got multi-generations of that.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that again in a criticism, I'm saying that's the environment that it was in. And
just for interrupting, a new preacher can come in and not know those relationships.
Yeah, I'm getting to it.
Yes,
Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
And that's where the trouble is.
Sure, okay.
And nobody tells you.
Right.
And since you put that in, let me just stop there and say, in pastoral interviewing, so if I can just switch it there, you'll have to get me back on that. But that was kind of my journey, the Greater Mount Zion. Then it led up to the church where I was. But let me just stop there for a minute, because somebody listening, and they're like, man, the interview and all this. I tell you, every pastor, every pulpit committee does that due diligence to know everything about you.
Right.
The average preacher is so happy to get a church, he knows nothing about the church. Now that's, study the church. I was called to Starlight Missionary Baptist Church in Beaumont. Man, they had done all that work on me. They knew I was in a fight at the church I was at. It wasn't no secret. They wanted me gone, and I wanted to be gone. I preached for Starlight, and the young people actually kind of stood up and said, yay, and the church felt, I think, in many ways, obligated. We need to call Ralph. And then we had this big church meeting. Oh, man, I mean, it was big. And Beaumont got a big Morehouse delegation down there. And one of the principals there, he stood up in the meeting, about 700 people in the old building. He said, we know you can preach, but can you lead? And I said, if Leah Coker would have called me, I could have saved them $5.7 million of research to save the Big Three Corporation. Everybody started kind of laughing and everything. They say, he ain't like me and I didn't like him, And I've been working on myself. I'm just now expressing my temperament for those who hear to say that that's how I was then.
Sure.
And I'll never get that night when he said that, but what he didn't know, everybody was saying, well, we're satisfied with the way he's answered. That's what they said. And they get ready to dismiss them. I said, we're not through. I said, you ask me your questions, I want to ask you some questions. So they had worked out this package. There's 680, 700 people in this meeting. So they had worked out this package, what they were going to give me. And I said, that's the value that you put on the pastor of the church? Well, that's what we give this and that. So I said, now I make more money than that in the middle of a church fight. I said, and the church that I pastor in the church fight don't have 3 accounts in Payne Weber. I said, you got 3. Oh man, they jumped up. How you know that? I said, the same way you researched me was the same way I researched you. What they didn't know was my pastor, I would spend some of my time summers in St. Louis. So my pastor there, sister was a member of that church. She said, you tell him, we got money. So we got 3 accounts, because they boasted about it in their church meeting. We have this much money in this Payne Weber. Oh man, they was having a fit, So my thing is to young preachers, don't get so happy to get a church that you don't ask no questions.
Wow.
You don't know nothing about the culture. Who's who? Why did he leave? So that when you get angry, I can say, wait a minute, You need to call them. You ain't mad at me, you mad at them. Yeah. Do not take your aggression out on me. You know, it's the equivalent of a woman that had a bad relationship. She say, listen, I'm sorry that didn't work for you, but do not hold me suspect of that. Right. So that was my, and I think that's great advice for a preacher to say, do some due diligence. Don't be so happy just to get the pulpit. Then 6 months, man, these people didn't say, well, if you would have asked some questions.
Sure.
You know, now what debts do you have?
Right.
And why are you in that?
Yeah.
And why did y'all put this here and not that? Just ask them. They ask you.
Right.
They want to know, what's your credit rating? Mm-hmm. Well, you ask the church, what's your credit rating? Because I need to know that I'm not coming to a place where I got to come and bail you out of everything. Sure. You know, so, you know.
And but then you need to know as well that there are 2 sides to all those stories. And sometimes you be so, the guy can be
3 or 4, yeah.
You know, and you need to be aware that what they did to the last guy, they may do to you. You know, you can't just believe every story they tell you about the last
Don't believe the press.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just true. You know, you sit down and say, come on. And do and just ask the question. But I tell you, that's one of the hardest things to get preachers to do. Sure. To just, you know, ask questions and stop acting like it didn't all happen until you got there. That's one of the great things there, you know. Sure. Every almost, you know, this, if it's any word, this is when I just start laughing. Oh, it was the worst place in the world. They never did nothing until you got there. You know, sing another song, you know. That's not true. I always tell them that at our church. I told them just Sunday, don't worry, the new pastor will come here and he'll stand up and say, after so many times with their friends, Wes didn't do nothing here. Yes. You know, people say, man, it built the building wrong, wasn't nobody here, church was empty, they never raised more money. Tell them, say, but now, the other side of it is you should. I mean, if you inherit 12, 13,000 people, you should outdo. Yeah. So it's like, well, I hope so. I mean, really, because you say, I didn't have to spend any of my years doing this, so now I can just push it. Sure. But the person who does that, that's when you know you're dealing with maturity and you're dealing with a person who's secure and a person with wisdom. Yeah. You pick it up immediately. You say, now here's a young person or a young man or young woman who is mature, they got wisdom. They've been around this, understand it, to say, hey man, none of this takes away from who I am. Because whatever corporation or organization or church, somebody got to come in and inherit to take it on. And just, you know, so there's nothing wrong with honoring the past to do it, you know. Yeah, but that's kind of my journey. And then when I got to Great Mount Zion, you know, I mean, in short, we came to this one conclusion. We don't fit each other.
How long did you serve there?
3.5, right at 4 years. Okay. We don't fit each other. And it came down strictly to leadership. I mean, just leadership. Let's buy land, we don't need land. So when I say let's buy land, there's a great story behind this. Let's buy land. He's trying to put the old folk out of their houses. That's what was circulated. You know, eventually, you know, article in the black paper, young preacher putting folk out there. We never did buy it, so you know. But today, across the street from that church, row houses, $350,000, $450,000, $500,000 on the land that they could have. And the people that say I was trying to put the folk who were elderly out, the elderly sold it to the other folks. That's the truth. Yeah. And now, locked in. Locked in, you know. But this is what happens when churches start becoming embittered. They don't see the future. They only look in the rearview mirror. They never look out the window. And so the community didn't want the church to leave because the little church makes our houses look better. Isn't that something? So it looks like the old houses or the old communities of the old sitcoms of My Three Sons and Leave It to Beaver. You know, that kind of stuff where you got the little houses and the little church right there and the little park. So we don't want that church to go nowhere. We want y'all to stay right there because there's so few of you that you don't disturb the traffic, you see. And it's just heartbreaking, you know. And that story that I just told, that's a story around America.
You're right.
You know, it's just around America.
You're right. So you're there 3.5 years. You leave.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's interesting. You know, I'm in the middle of saying, hey, it's time for you to go. You know, I mean, I always tell them they stopped paying me and everything. So I was gone then. Church meeting, we didn't call you here to, you know, to bring these people here to this church. And Beaumont calls me, Starlight. So I'm ready to go there. I mean, it's a nice, brand new building. Dr. McCarthy built this church, and it's a history to that. His wife was Miss Bishop. So, and then he himself, now, in Beaumont, he was a Tuskegee graduate and an Andover Newton graduate. Now, that's the son. The daddy, I hope I got it right, I think he's the son. And the daddy was at Rock Island, where L.A. Kazee used to be. Man, I mean, it's unbelievable how these lines are crossing, right?
Sure.
Trained men down in Beaumont, right? And they built these major houses. So I wanted to go, man. They was excited about me, and I knew I could go there, man, and be a splash. Stay there for about 2.5 years, because I could save money. I worked out after that big fight or argument about paying Weber. They just said, give him what he wants. So I negotiated a house and car and all that relocation, and you know, because they had money. So you know, it's kind of like, well, you shouldn't have tried to hem him in. So he caught us, you know, and we got to pay for it. And so I said, man, I told Reed, we could 3 years, I could save this much money, man. That'd be enough money to go do a PhD. And I said, we can be out of here. And I went down there to tell the people something. And I knew that night when I saw those people out there, I said, I can't come here. I knew, you know, I also knew that church was just a bigger church than what I was leaving. The same kind of stuff, just a different, it'd been the same thing. And, but planting a church was just absolutely not on my mind, because there was a side of me that said, no, I didn't sign up for this, you know. I went to school to go now my idea of thing of pastor, and the reason why I know how people think, because I said, let me go and work for somebody at a major church. And my temperament was such, I never would have undermined them. They would have never had to worry about nothing like that. Because my attitude would be, I'm enjoying all the benefits while he got to go to the church meeting, because I don't have to go to it. It's like he got to go, and I'm going to support it all the way, Doc. I'm down all the way. And then, you know, when it's time
praying for you while you go to the meeting.
Fight breaking out. And when he's finished with his tenure there, you know, Ralph just come on, step up. And I don't have to build nothing. I don't need to do none of that.
Sure.
You know, it wasn't that I didn't think I could. It was like, why? You know, why? So nothing wrong with talking about being a successor if you can do it with the right spirit. You know, I would have honored and cherished this man, you know, say, Pastor so-and-so was the greatest thing in the world. He would never have to worry about nothing. Like, you know, I was like, I'm taking it wherever we need to go, these kind of things.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't in the cards. I mean, it just wasn't in the cards. And I really felt, and the way that I came to that conclusion is that one night when I was praying, I got to make a decision. And I mean, I knew Greater Mount Zion was gone. That's going to be in the rearview mirror. You got to be out of here. That's in the rearview mirror. Now you got to make a decision in a hurry between Beaumont and what you're going to do. And I did something, man, that I tell people, don't you ever do. I said no. I said, you're out of Greater Mount Zion, and no to Starlight. And there I was, faced with 32 people. But the decision came to me one night when I was reading my favorite poem, The Road Less Traveled. Two roads diverge in yellow woods. And when I read that, I could just hear the Spirit saying, I'll be with you wherever you go.
Wow.
You stay and fight at GMZ, I'll be with you there. You go to Beaumont, and I'll be with you there. Or you can take the road less traveled, and I'll make the difference there. And I felt like the road less traveled didn't mean it was going to be a big. I didn't think that it was going to be, you know, they call them mega churches now. Let me tell you something, man. We ain't got no mega churches. We got a lot of people. People may take issue with me. You ain't mega until ministry match up with what show up on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
That's when you get mega.
Yes, sir.
And for the most part, we ain't got no mega.
Yeah.
I tell our church, we may be oversized, but we ain't mega. So it never was a matter like, man, freedom to do what you want. Because the other side of this for everybody that want to plant a church is that once people start giving and investing, you don't get 100% say so no more. You know, it may work when we at the, you know, at the 10 building.
Yeah.
It may even work when you're in a gymnasium. But when you start talking about we got to pay off, buy land, people start saying, I got stake in this building now.
Sure, right.
And I need to feel confident that as much as I love my pastor, he's not the only person making decisions.
Wow.
You know. So it had nothing to do with that. But it had a lot to do with, like, I want to see what the journey going to be like. It did have some of that. Because I didn't know. You know, people say, did you ever think? Say, how could you? I mean, I didn't even have a point of reference. You know, I mean, every church started from nothing, a few, at some time, every church around. So I said, well, you just look around what God can do. But I didn't know what he could do, you know. And so I didn't do it for any of that, you know, oh, man, I can have my way. You know, it's like, no, I wanted the church that was already up with some people, and I knew I could build off of that.
Right.
You know, and nothing wrong with that. I would have loved it. I wouldn't have felt bad about it either. But the journey, you know, I mean, it's been a good journey. It's been a lot of work, but it's been a good journey.
25 years the church is now.
25 years.
Yeah. Well, tell me briefly just the story of the progression of the church's development over those 25 years. I know briefly it's...
Well, I'll do it. I'm like the president now. You know, they say that our president, he can go on and answer these questions. And I know I can, you know, but the first year, from 32 people to about a little more than 150, right at 200 people, we worshiped for a year at Brook Hollow Marriott Hotel. And it was a good place.
Is that where the name was associated from?
That's where the name is associated from. That's right, Brook Hollow. And that area is Brook Hollow.
Brook Hollow, okay.
And I'll show you how the Church Without Walls came up to. You know, people always ask me, no, I say, all them names that you hear of Church Without came after us. All of them. You check it back. They came along at the late 90s, early 2000s. You know. I thought the way Church Without Walls came as our subtitle, I was preaching a series in the book of Acts. And you know, that's something else, preaching in the series. I didn't know what to preach. I heard E.K. Bailey say he preached Acts when he started. So I felt like that's a good place to start. I didn't know nothing about preaching no series. So I'm like, man, I'm getting tired of this series.
Yeah.
You know? But, and that's the truth. That's how it came about. But it turned out to be the right thing to do. And I looked at Ray Stedman's book on body life, and he had wrote this great Bible studies on Acts, and he broke it up, you know, 1 to 12, and then 12 to. So I did 1 to 12 as much as I could anyway of the embryonic development of the church. And I got to one point, and I borrowed a tagline from my pastor, man, when he was talking about everything that Jesus did, he did outside, you know, man, just outside, you know. And man, I did everything outside, man. Man, we was having church, you know. And Marsha Henderson came to me, and she said, man, that's the church without walls. I said, what you mean? She said, he did everything outside. No wall, the church without wall. And that's what we put under that. Brook Hollow Baptist Church, then under that, the church without wall.
Wow. So
when we moved out further west, outside of the Brook Hollow community, we just flipped it, the church without walls.
Sure.
You know, and we started sounding kind of strange, Brook Hollow, because nobody, when we was on the other side, everybody knew what Brook Hollow was. Oh, this is the Brook Hollow community. That they didn't know. But interestingly, the people across the street built a community called Brook Hollow. so people thought it was our community, but we have no association with it.
Wow.
I told them, man, you need to give us the tithe and offering off every house that's built, you know. Anyway, the first year and a half or whatever, we was in the Brook Hollow Marriott. And then we found, I saw that you have the building here. You have the Jacksonville Business Journal, where the building that we purchased on the corner of Bingham and Pine Mountain used to be the Houston Business Journal. And man, we were looking all over Houston. And when I saw that building, I said, man, that's it. I said, that's it. We went inside, it's 17,000 square feet of building. And sit on like almost 2 acres of land. You have to see this, because people hear this, they say, they fabricate it. But you have to see the pictures of it. So we gutted that building out, and we had a little sanctuary that sat about 400 people, and then we had a little walkway, narrow walkway, man, narrow, and that you walk. We made that into the children's church. We used to worship in that first. Then it had another building that had all these offices. We turned that to education. So we had education, children, and sanctuary. Man, people would line up around that building to get in, just line up around it, every service. So we had grew to 3 services, and then, man, we had to have 3 services in a week. Man, we was having a ball there, you know, just a lot of fun. And we were young and maturing in Christ, and we believed God could do anything. We just believed he could do anything. Even to the point when we said, oh, man, we found 40 acres of land, and that's a whole nother story there. But anyway, so we stayed there for, 6, 7, 8 years. We found the land where we are now, out Highway 6 in West Little York, 40 acres of land. We got that land for $114,000. That's a giveaway anywhere in the world. And this is prime real estate. It was owned by Austin Presbyterian School of Theology. They needed to unload the land. I was invited to go to the College of Biblical Studies banquet. Haddon Robinson was speaking. This school is kind of affiliated with Denver Theological, Dallas Theological, all that. And so he's speaking on stewardship. The chairman of the board is there. He said, are you Ralph West? I say, yeah. He said, look, man, we got 40 acres of land, $114,000. We need to know where you buy that land today. We need to unload it now. The taxes are killing me. So I said, yes. and I was like, man, nobody know where this land is and all this. I'm out there. And I come to find out 75% of our church was driving in from there. Wow. So we moved into a community where there was absolutely no churches. No, and especially no black churches. And man, we just in the middle of it, you know. And so, you know, and so we've been there, and then we plateaued around, I don't know, we moved in 97 by 2000 and 3, 4, 5, maybe we plateaued, and I mean, we really did. And we never wanted to go in this multi-campus thing. That was never, because we had already planted more than 10 different churches with Southern Baptist UBA. So we knew the value of helping guys plant churches. This church facility was just a little more than most of a new church plant could pay for, and it was like 4.7 million or something like that. 30 acres of land, sanctuary, education, administration, stuff like that, you know, just a modular building. But the land was prime. And we bought it. But we bought it because we had 1,400 families that was just in 3 miles of the place. Now in both places, between both campuses, those churches surrounded by over 1 million people. Wow. So you sit down and you say, hey, why are you crying about people? If you got that much evangelism, go win some people to Jesus, you know, which is another story within itself. And then the original campus reopened a few years ago on Easter because some of the members, they just never could depart from it. And so we just do it, you know. So
at this point, you're at how many services?
6 services on Sunday.
6 services on Sunday, and typical Sunday you are preaching how many of those?
5.
5 of those?
Yeah. 5. The old man still got it, dude. The old man is still going.
Yes, sir.
And I drank no Powerade. I'm not on no 5-hour nothing. No Red Bull. None of that. None of that. Just go to bed at 8:30 on Saturday, Wake up 4:30, man, pray my prayers, meditate over my word that God has given to me.
Yeah.
Head on out and just try to monitor myself where I go. You know.
Well, let's talk a little bit about preaching.
Okay.
Some of the questions I got to ask you were the obvious questions I'm sure you get all the time. One is just tell us a little bit about your preparation process to get ready for Sunday.
Yeah, some people who ask that, preachers who ask that, may have read the article that I submitted in the book that you and I submitted to Dr. LaRue's Power in the Pulpit. From that submission to now, my sermon preparation has changed dramatically.
Yeah, likewise, I get that.
And preaching now in terms of preparation is born for me out of early selection of biblical texts. I lean heavy on planned preaching. It helps me manage my time wisely. And it takes away from me the need to go rummaging through just material at random. Where do I go this week? So I try to find 2 and 3 times throughout the year to think through that. I've not got to a place where I can think a year ahead of myself, and I don't think that I want to.
Okay.
I want to leave some space for interruptions. I think interruptions in long sermon series are great. You know, this is a sub conversation going on now. You know, to the audience and then to you. You know, because of what you shared with me about having to make a break. I think that that's good if you're going to tackle a whole book. Yeah. And methodically go through. I think the interruptions are great. Okay. It's the equivalent of saying, you know, a Scandal is back on, you know, Karen Washington. I want to see Scandal, you know. And I get upset because, man, hey, let's get to season 2, but they got some work they need to do in between. So they put another series in between the last season. Next thing you know, you're back at the season and say, I didn't even know that much time had gone by. Right. A whole summer, I didn't even know it. I think that's what happens when you have these kind of unscheduled divine interruptions in preaching to say, oh, he's back. Well, we back good. Yeah. And you may have to take another break. But, you know, I think in that case, set it up like they do the television series, you know. So it's born out of early selection of text. The change that I've made from the article in terms of mapping out something that takes place every day, I still do that. I just try to do more in a day. Because I have a sermon text already selected, I'll try to read that text as often as I can or as often as I think about that particular text. Wherever I may be, you know, riding in the car, at the airport, in the waiting room at the hospital, you know, at the courthouse, wherever they're just sitting out back. When I'm saying, oh, what I'm going to read, say, well, let's read over these texts, you know, just read through it. So now you already got a head start and say, okay, the week now is here. Now the week is here. You've been reading something, what is going on? So, well, I've been making notes in my mind about this. You know, I'm reading John 11. I've heard about Lazarus, but I've noticed something peculiar about preaching or reading this story of Lazarus. I can't tackle the whole story. I only have 30 minutes to do. And I noticed, though, that there's this reference of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, that these friends. So I'm thinking about this, you know, I'm thinking about this. This is just an observation that I made. Then it say, you know what, Jesus always show up too late. You know, they say, oh, you know, it's something about the moments in life and all that. And then how are you going to get this man out of a grave? So I'm thinking about this. So it's Monday. And at the same time, now I still want to read my material because I want to weigh in now to say, I wonder what Raymond Brown has said in John. But now I got to meticulously read Brown. So let me go over here now and get something that's kind of mid-range. Maybe I'll grab the NIV here. and read through it, because I got a contemporary section that I could kind of read through it. You know? But then I need to know how this thing structures, because this is a big narrative. It's 44 verses. So let me read something more in the homiletical digest, commentary, interpretation, say, because this is going to help me see how it's structured. And the one thing I pick up immediately, this is just a big story. This is John's way of writing. He got a big story. Yeah. So I'm starting on that early. That's day one. You know, that's day one. I'm reading through, and I'm thinking not just my thoughts that I've been thinking, but now I'm thinking my thoughts along with making notes in the margin of Brown, NIV, and interpretation.
Gotcha.
You see? Because now I'm discovering, look, you got a week, and Sunday is here in the morning. So I recommend that sermon preparation began immediately. Immediately. I remember for years, I did so much detective work that by the time Thursday had come, I hadn't written one word down. Yep. And then I'm under the gun because I've been studying, but now I'm trying to organize what I've been studying, and now it's Friday. Right. And I'm really up, it's like, oh no, man. And I'm writing, and then like most non-professional writers, instead of me just hammering out what's in my head, I'm trying to craft the sentence. Right. And that's taking an hour just to get one line right. Yes. And then you're not going to memorize the line anyway, so it's like, what's going on? So I say start immediately, not just early, start immediately. As soon as the Bible opens to the text that has been selected for your preaching, start preaching that text then. Even if you're just sitting around with the text, just start preaching somewhere in the text. It may not, like when you're the kid, it's amazing how homiletically in tune you were as an untrained preacher. Right. Because when I was a young preacher and didn't know anything like homiletics, hermeneutics, and word studies and commentary, when I didn't know any of that, I just open up the Bible. And I'll get to Lazarus, and I just start hooping Lazarus, Jesus came into the city, And the thing is, you preaching the text now. And so now if you're not careful, you get so bogged down with technicalities that you let that override your creativity. So start immediately with the sermon. And then once you start there, then you can start feeding in and say, now, wait a minute, I've thought through outlines, and I've thought through theses, and I'm thinking through with these writers what they're saying. I start saying, shape the sermon in. Gotcha. Start shaping the sermon immediately. And of course, there's more to them. For those who say I didn't get nothing out of that, his reply would say, okay, this is what you're saying. Write the text, write the title down, and then at that point, get a sheet of paper and write your best thought out about what you think that text is saying. Just start writing. You got a pre-understanding of the biblical text, so just start writing. Yeah. Write everything that you know about. Try to exhaust your heart on that paper. It's disorganized, it's not making sense, but that's fine. Because now that you've done that, this is my sermon. On the same day, let me sit down and read the heavyweight critical commentary to see, am I in the right sphere? And I guarantee if you start reading that way, some subtlety will step out where you say, wow. Yeah. Where you say, oh man, some little subtlety where you say, wow. But now you're shaping, you see. And then from that, imagine how much material you have just doing that. Even if you said, I only have from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Man, you can cover some ground, underlining, writing in the margin, and you're not just writing to write. Try to craft, this is a movement, this is a subplot, this is a tension right here. And bring in, when it's narrative, just bring in what you remember from reading from an English class in high school. Wait a minute. This is plot. Something is happening right here. This is tension. Oh, wait, well, now this is resolved. Wait a minute. Resolution just to get more tension?
Yeah.
You know, and you just start thinking that way and say, wow. So you're working on the sermon all the way, you know. And consequently, you know, and then what happened is you're building the sermon from the ground up, you know. You just stand up and preach it.
I'm going to do some quick shot questions. Okay. Do you write out a full manuscript at this stage?
I do.
What do you typically take to the pulpit besides your Bible?
Typically just the Bible. When the sermon is gone cold, you know, when it's a cold case and I'm trying to, you know, stoke the flames again, unapologetically, I just fold a sheet of paper. And the notes probably mean nothing to nobody. It's no point 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, none of that. I may just put in like a name that is hard to pronounce. I need to glance at that name.
Gotcha.
Or I may look at it and say, now, you know all of this, but don't forget this one line. So I may just put down there and say, don't forget, you know, and you know the purpose of Bethany in this and the home, you know. And then I may get to another movement and say, and you know, all of that, but don't forget this. So I may just write down 1 or 2 reminders to me, unapologetically, you know. I tell my students at Truett, never sacrifice content for style. Because the only person that's impressed with your outline is you.
Yeah.
People in the audience are not impressed with outline. They don't know what they're listening to in the first place.
Yeah.
All they want to be able to do is to hear the message.
Right.
So the people who say, man, I forgot to say, good, we're glad. We couldn't take another P in the sermon. We had enough powers and prestiges and popular. We couldn't take another one. You know?
Yeah.
And I tell people, you know, and I know a lot of people do that for memorization's sake. And some of them do it to try to be cute in it.
Yeah.
And, you know, but as you mature, hopefully your preaching will too. You know, I don't want to sound like what I sound like when I was 25 or 35 or even 40.
Sure.
You know, I don't want to do that. So that's what I think.
You don't, as I've listened to you over the years now, you're not putting a bunch of emphasis typically at this stage on sermon points.
Yeah, but not, I really do. I put strong emphasis on them. I just announce them subtly now.
Right. And
especially, you know, especially if it's in a narration.
Yeah.
To just enough, and the way I announce them is I just kind of pause where you say, he's transitioning here now. He's taking us in another direction. Sometimes, you know, I'm leaning to this, I'm on the front porch of this, I'm in the deep water of that, you know. Let me swing from the tree limb, You know, where people say, okay, something is going on, but no.
But not in the more traditional outline sense.
No, I'm so far from that now. I've been like that for now 15 years, you know. And I like it, you know, but it's just at stake now. You look in the audience face and you say, you know, these people, they need as much gospel as they can get. And I don't need anything to fog the way for them, you know.
You by necessity to some degree have to think in terms of time limits in preaching because you got to get somewhere else to preach.
Yeah.
How has that either negatively or positively affected your preaching?
Yeah, well, in a negative way, I guess I'm not able to cover the material that I wish I could cover in a sermon. And negatively, it has almost shaped me anywhere other than on Sunday morning, that at 30 minutes, 35, depending on the environment, you know, but, you know, I mean, but other than that 35 minutes, typically it's like, hey man, when he read that text and announce it, you can set your clock 35. If he go 40, it's because he know he doesn't have to go somewhere, but it won't be longer than that, you know. So positively though, it has made me be laconic in sermon preparation to use an economy of words and to move the sermon along quickly. I may make a statement here, say a sentence or two here, and then move to another statement. Sentence to hear that. You know, people say, man, I want you to tell me, you heard enough, you got it. You know, I mean, really. And so, and that's one of the things. So the positive side is, it says, use your time more wisely. Mm-hmm. And I'm conditioned that way. I mean, you know, like somebody may say, oh man, you just got time. You haven't Fall Institute. Mm-hmm. The audience have come in. Many of these people have made a sacrifice to leave immediately to worship to come here. Mm-hmm. So they've listened to a women's ministry, Sheila Bailey. Mm-hmm. They've listened to men's ministry, Lloyd Blue. Mm-hmm. And those who preach and those who teach here, biblical interpretation, Olford. And that's those classes, what, an hour long? Mm-hmm. So they've already been in, for the most part, an hour. Right. The last thing they need from me is an hour service.
Right, I get you.
All they need from me is 30 minutes, because what my goal now in an institute is to do is to say, can he take what these instructors have presented to us in interpretation, application, and model it for the next 30 minutes in preaching? Yeah. So they look up and say, you know, your vision has succeeded. Yeah. You brought somebody who modeled what we're listening to in class. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. That is great. This is an interesting subject that I get to talk to you about. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be able to get to talk to many about. Our background, culture, and traditions, you know, coming up, the major preachers were guys who could hoop. And who could. No. Yeah. Now, and you had guys who didn't, and many who didn't was because they couldn't.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, you know, you had the major hoopers. Mm-hmm. For me personally, when I began to hear you, and it would have been initially on the road. Right. I was hearing you at places on the road where you'd finish your lesson, man, and sit down. Mm-hmm. None of that. Mm-hmm. And that was real interesting to me, because guys who could do it and who chose not to just get a lesson and sit down, I did not really note that. And then over the years, when I was getting tapes and stuff from the Church Without Walls, you rarely going to get it. Right. And of course, that's still in our culture and beyond our culture, a conversation. How did that aspect of black preaching shape you? How did you kind of move and kind of determine your own turf about stuff like that? Yeah. Did I set you up kind of there?
No, I appreciate that, because I'm on a journey too of asking questions about the African American preaching tradition. Okay. And you're right. Those who have the gift of celebration, hooping, intoning, feel obligated, almost an indebtment, that if you don't do it, then you haven't done your preaching. My pastor was a great celebrator. Oh, man. I mean, he could shut it down. O.C. Johnson Sr. You go on YouTube, they got one or two clips, but those clips don't do him justice. They don't do him justice, man. I mean, Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, I watched him dump that house. For those of you who are not a part of our tradition and you're listening, dump that house is a colloquium that means he shouted the house, ran the people, all that. Right. And those were the days when people shouted, you packing them out the doors, that kind of stuff, jumping out the balcony, literally running all over, falling in the floor. I mean, and when I went to college, my first convocation, I heard Harry Wright preach. And I was like, man, I said, because, you know, I come from Texas and Houston and everybody, you know. And I was like, man, I enjoyed it. You know, I didn't think it any less preaching or anything. I really enjoyed it. I said, man, this is really good. And then I would hear some of the other professors. I was like, this is some good stuff. You know, I'm like, and then, I mean, we brought folk in chapel and they shut it down. So I was like, so, and I early on, at about 18 years old, I started wondering how much preaching is born out of spirit, experience, excitement, joy, and how much of it is contrived. because I picked up even in my own preaching that sometimes it seemed like this hoop don't fit this sermon. Mm-hmm. But I felt obligated to do it because of my tradition and my ability. Mm-hmm. So when I started pastoring, something happened. I would go to these different conferences because I wanted to hear who these popular speakers were. And for the most part, they wasn't hooping. Mm. And then, you know, probably because the ones who I was going to hear couldn't hoop. But then I run into one or two brothers who wasn't hooping, like a Massey.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, but he was preaching. Dr. Scott, I mean, you know, he is a, you know, but you know, that wasn't no, you know, we talking about hooping, you talking about, and, you stretching it out.
Right.
So I was like, so you can do this. So they gave legitimacy to me.
Sure. That
every sermon did not have to have a hoop at the end of it. But when I became a pastor, I understood as I started maturing young that, I'll never get to make this comment. I said to my mother, I said, you know, I want my preaching to be where when I celebrate, they know they got extra today. Mm. I don't want them to say, when I don't, he didn't.
Wow.
And I did. I said that in my 20s, man. I was like 25, 26 years old, you know. And I set the course at that moment. That when I went in, they said, but it wasn't nothing else to do but to close that sermon. Right. You couldn't do nothing else with it. And that's what I felt, you know. So, and I've had the pressure. I've had people even now to say, come on, Wes. You know, one time I said, man, I don't have the energy for it. You know, my voice is shot. And I kind of felt like Mays the other night. I saw him on the awards, and Mays' voice is all tore up. He was trying his best. Joy and pain. I want to say, leave it alone, man. You know, and so I was like, y'all done woke poor May's voice out. But the truth is, and I love celebrating, you know, sure. But I love it when it is innate and when it is an extension of the overflow of worship. I think when celebration comes is when the whole church, we all celebrate. Yeah. I ain't celebrating to get you up. Yeah. We all up together, and we all know, hey man, it ain't number one place to go. Yeah. But out of here this way. Yeah, you know. Yeah. We kind of experienced some of that last night, I think. You know, where the church was, it wasn't hooping, but it was like, we all there. You know, we have all got to that place. Right. And God has called us out. Yeah. So we all together. So that's when it's fun. The church then took over. Yeah. So you don't have to say nothing. Yeah, yeah. The church says you can sit down now. Yeah. We'll take over now. That's where the real joy is. Yeah. And I pray more and more that preachers can come from under that kind of burden of thinking that they have to entertain congregations and audiences and to rely upon the Holy Spirit and the power of the Word. One of the things that I think preachers forget is that, well, I shouldn't say that. That would be judgmental and moralistic, and I didn't mean it like that. I think one of the things that preachers should not forget, let me say that, is that in preaching, the Holy Spirit got a role too. You know, because you'll hear now, you know, well, man, you know, I don't preach that, and nobody want to come hear that, or, you know, I'll do that for Bible studies. And, you know, I heard Will Willimon say that he was preaching on forgiveness, and he tried to, you know, smooth it over, and this lady came after the service, says, do you mean to tell me that I got to forgive my husband who's abused me, talk this way, me, all this? And then Will Willimon, you know, in this way, said, look, look, I only got 20 minutes. I can't explain it, you know. So she said, but do you mean it? He said, yes. And then she said, just checking. He said, when he got into the art to study, and he was taking off his robe. He said the Holy Spirit came in and said, hey, who told you you got to protect me from my people?
My. Wow.
So that's what I see when it comes down to saying, charting the course of preaching on that. Say, hey, who told you that your music at the end is what's really moving this church?
Yeah.
I got stake in the church. You know, I got a Bible that I've written and a gospel to be preached.
Yeah.
And if anything happened in the hearing of the people, I got something to do with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not your cleverness and crafting. I got some stake in it too.
Wow, that's great.
I think that's one thing that we have to remember.
That's great.